Everybody, it's so nice to see you all here today. We have a small group, but we are recording this, so we're going to have people watching from home too and being able to access that, which is the case sometimes with caregivers. Sometimes it's hard to get away, right? So we will have this posted to our website and social media page as well. A couple of announcements I wanted to give before we get started. So November is Social Connection Awareness Month, and if you haven't heard my whole pitch about Senior Social Connection Bingo, here it is again. We have cards over here, bingo cards, and each square on the bingo card is a different event or activity that's happening in McFarland for older adults, and I can get you a card if you don't have one already. Each event that you attend or have attended this month, you cross that off. If you get 4 in a row, it could be up and down, across, diagonal, whatever. You could fill the whole thing too, and then that's really super bingo. But you do 4 in a row, you will return it back to us because on the back there's a place for you to put your name and your phone number, and you can be entered to win a drawing. And the drawing is pretty snazzy. It is for 2 ticket vouchers for a show of your choice at Stoughton Opera House, and they have quite a lovely lineup for their 25-26 season. And a gift certificate to Palenque Mexican restaurant here in town. So you could do dinner and go out to a show with a friend. So try to do that if you get a chance. If you have any questions about any of the programs, let me know. It's a wide range of different things to make it accessible for all sorts of older adults to get together and connect. That's the point. Let's see. Tomorrow we have our Thanksgiving dinner with John Duggleby performing. Unfortunately, is now full, and we have a waiting list for the meal. However, if you want to come just for the musical portion of the event, let me know, and we would be able to accommodate more folks if they just want to come for the musical portion. We'll also be recording that performance, so you can see that online as well. A couple new things coming up because December's right around the corner here, and we have a packed week in the first week of December. We offered our line dancing with Nancy. It was a drop-in program. We were going to see what people thought. I know, Lou, you were there, as well as a whole lot of other people. Like, we could not believe how many people attended that event. So clearly people want to do some line dancing. So we are doing a session, a three session series of it in December. And the first one starts bang on December 1st. So it's in our newsletter. We have copies up here. If you do want to sign up for that, let me know, because I'm expecting, based on how many people were there the other day, that class will probably fill up. So let me know about that. Also, we're still doing our card group on Monday afternoons. If you haven't come to cards, please come and check it out. We would love to see you there. That's from 1 to 3 o'clock on Monday afternoons. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker who is speaking about preventing caregiver burnout, because this is also National Caregiver Appreciation Month. So we appreciate all our caregivers. We know how hard it is to care for a loved one 24/7, and we really want to make sure you have the tools necessary to take care of yourself. So, Kristin Litzelman, a PhD. She is an associate professor in human development and family studies and a state specialist for the Division of Extension at University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her work centers on the impact of illness on families, how family caregivers are impacted by their role, how caregiver and care recipient outcomes are intertwined, and how we can help caregivers overcome barriers to accessing support and enhancing their own resiliency. So if you could give a round of applause to welcome Kristin. Thank you so much.
Hi, folks. Thanks for being here. And anyone who is watching the live stream or watching this later, thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited to talk about this with you today. You just heard my bio, but I want to share a little bit about why you should believe me. You can choose if you believe me or not, right? You can decide that. But I literally spend all of my time, all day, every day, reading about caregiving, talking about caregiving, thinking about caregiving, trying to figure out how to help caregivers more. Sometimes I even wake up in the middle of the night thinking about caregiving. And so this is the core of what I do. And so my goal today is just to share a little bit of what I know through those conversations, through what I see in the research, through my own personal experiences to help you maybe think about this differently, or maybe reinforce some things that you already know through your own experiences. We already talked about this. It's National Family Caregiver Month. So this is the perfect time to be having this conversation. One of the things that I have learned through all of that talking and reading and thinking is that caregiving is all around us and we don't talk about it very much. It's invisible. I've also learned that the best way to get other people talking about caregiving is to start talking about caregiving, and not the dry, boring facts and figures. There will be some of those in my presentation, but to really talk about the experience, to talk about the feeling of caregiving, to talk about the stories that caregivers have. And so we'll be interspersing some of those dry facts and figures with that story element, and hopefully that will resonate, or you can hold it in your mind for the future, and it might come back to you if you start to experience some of these things yourself. One of the things that we hear a lot in a lot of contexts, but definitely in family caregiving, is this metaphor of the oxygen mask. So when you're on an airplane, they'll tell you to help someone else, put your oxygen mask on first before you help someone else put theirs on. And that is true on airplanes. It's also a metaphor for making sure that we're taking care of ourselves so that we are able to take care of someone else, so that we have the ability, so that we have the energy to take care of someone else. So this is a comic. At the top, it says, "Life lesson, put on your own oxygen mask before assisting others." And then on the bottom, it says, "Seriously, you can't help anyone if you're dead." And so this is a message that we get a lot in caregiving, but this can be easier said than done, because sometimes we can be gasping for breath and not even realize it. We don't even realize that it's time for oxygen masks for anybody. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. I always like to give a little roadmap so that you know where you're going. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today. And then I'm also sharing what the core message is that I'm hoping you'll come away with for each of these things. I like to do this up front, because then if you get bored and you go away or you fall asleep, you have at least got the core message. So the first thing we're going to talk about is caregiving in context, what caregiving looks like. And the core message here is that caregiving comes in many different flavors. It looks many different ways. And whatever you might experience as a caregiver, you're in good company. Other people are having a similar experience. There's such a wide range. Everyone has a shared experience. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the basics of burnout. And so the core message here is burnout feels like exhaustion. It feels like apathy. Nothing really matters. It feels like detachment. And it can creep up on us. And that's important. There's not a stop and go light for burnout. It's not either burnt out or I'm not burnt out. It's a spectrum, and the symptoms can kind of creep up on us unexpectedly. And then the last piece that we're going to cover, and this is the most important piece, so I'm going to try to spend the most time there, is recovery and resilience. And the message here, and this is really important, the cure for burnout isn't rest. Rest is helpful. Rest gives us space. But if we just have rest, if we take some time to rest, when we get back into it, it just hits us right away again. The cure for burnout is connection, whether that's connection with ourselves, whether that's connection with the world around us, with awe, with joy, or whether that's connection with other people. And that's how we get through burnout. That's how we recover from burnout. That's how we prevent burnout. The other piece here is that everyone is different. So what works for me to build that connection, what fills my cup, is going to be different from what fills your cup and what fills your neighbor's cup. So the trick here, and it's hard and it's tricky, but the important part is to lean into that self-reflection, to try new things and notice what works for you as an individual, because we all are going to respond to something different, and it doesn't matter what works for someone else. What matters is what feels nourishing to you. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit of a care story here. Once upon a time, there was a woman, because often, but not always, it is a woman, who suddenly found herself in an extremely intense care role. The specific details of the care role don't really matter, Maybe she's caring for an aging parent with worsening dementia or Parkinson's. Maybe it's a spouse or a partner who's had a stroke. Maybe it's a loved one who's going through cancer treatment. Regardless, her world has flipped upside down. Like all of us, she has a lot of other commitments. A household to run, bills to pay, family members and friends relying on her. Maybe she's working age and has a full-time job. Maybe she volunteers at a community organization that really needs her skills. Maybe she helps take care of her grandchildren. She goes into her care role determined and optimistic. She will keep going. She will persevere. She can handle anything and do it all. Okay, so first we're going to cover caregiving in context. And as I said earlier, what I want to talk about here is the way that care roles can show up in many different ways and kind of give you a sense of the universality of it. The fact that everyone at some point is going to be touched by caregiving, whether they are a caregiver or whether they receive care. So I'm really going to dig into some of that background information to try to emphasize that point. So this is where we get into the dry facts. When we ask people in Wisconsin, hey, have you been a caregiver in the last 30 days? 1 in 5 say that they have. So 20% of people in Wisconsin are currently a caregiver, have been a caregiver in the last 30 days. When we ask the people who aren't caregivers, do you think you're going to become a caregiver sometime in the next 2 years? Another 13% say yes. So that's 1 in 8. When we map that out, if we put 100 people on the state of Wisconsin and we map out those 19 people who are already caregivers and the 13 people who are going to become caregivers or think they will in the next 2 years, this is what it looks like. And that's just right now. That's a lot of people. So very, very common. And as I said, often people don't talk about it. So we don't know all around us who the caregivers are because they hold that deep inside. Caregivers look an awful lot like non-caregivers, although there's a little bit of difference. I'm going to start at the bottom here. So many caregivers, 57% of caregivers are women, but that also means there's a lot of caregivers who are not women, and that's compared to just under 50% in people who are not caregivers, adults. Many caregivers are married, but many are not. Many caregivers have full-time jobs or part-time jobs, but many don't. Some caregivers have children in the home. This is our sandwich generation, people who are caregiving for someone who has an illness or a disability and also are doing childcare in the home, whether that's their own children or whether that's grandchildren. They just have children in the home. We also see on the far side there the age distribution of caregivers. And what I want you to take away from that is that caregivers are all ages. There are a lot of caregivers kind of in that middle age category and that older age category, but there's also a lot of caregivers who are young adults, 18 to 29. And there's a lot of caregivers who are in our sort of oldest old age group, 80 and older. And I bring this up in particular because I've noticed when I talk about caregiving, people tend to have an idea in their head, a picture in their mind of what caregiving is. And it's usually based on their own experiences. So for some people, it is someone caring for an older adult. For some people, it's someone caring for a child, whether a young child or an adult child who has some sort of disability or intellectual impairment. And it really depends on where people have experienced caregiving before, what that looks like for them. And so I bring this up to help people realize, help you all realize that whatever's in your mind as far as caregiving is caregiving. And also a lot of other things are caregiving too. And when you say caregiver and you've got that picture in your mind, the person next to you might have a completely different picture in your mind, but it is all caregiving. I like to talk about care tasks. Often I've learned that people don't necessarily recognize that they are a caregiver, but when I talk about care tasks and what caregivers do, they start to recognize, oh yeah, I do those things, or my neighbor does those things, or I know people who do those things. Makes it a little easier to connect with. So things like sitting in on health appointments, being that extra set of eyes and ears to hear the information, to help make decisions. Helping with housework or chores. Keeping a clean house is hard, and this is a key care task that some people take. Picking up groceries or bringing a meal. Driving, lots of transportation duties on errands or to those appointments. Helping with personal care tasks, things like showering or eating. managing finances for a loved one or helping them manage their own finances, encouraging a loved one to take care of themselves. This is the reminders. Hey, did you take your medicine today? Hey, you're supposed to go for walks. Did you go for a walk today? Can I go with you? And providing emotional support. I think that one gets undercounted a fair amount because providing emotional support, that's just what we do for people we love, right? That's what we do when we are a loving spouse or a caring child or a loving parent. This is what we do in relationships, and it's a really key care role that we see people take on. Caregiving also shows up in a lot of different areas, and I'm not going to go too deep into this slide, but often in my caregiving world, kind of in the academic and healthcare space, when we talk about caregiving, it's always, we're talking about the caregiver for a certain condition type. So we talk about dementia caregivers, and we talk about cancer caregivers, and we talk about parents caring for kids with intellectual disabilities. And that separates caregivers out in a way that isn't always super helpful. It can be more helpful to think about where caregivers are in their experience. So things like, are they suddenly managing a crisis? That's one care experience that people share across different care roles, care types, but that they all have in common. There are similar characteristics when they're managing a crisis. It feels similar. Are they transitioning between phases? Are they going from caregiver to non-caregiver or back again? Are they just helping someone with a static condition? It might be hard, but it's the same. So these are all different places where people can fall. And again, I bring this up because it helps think about care not as what's the condition that I'm supporting someone with, but where am I in my journey? What's happening that's maybe causing me stress or making things easy or bringing me joy? Back to our caregivers in Wisconsin. On average, of those caregivers who say they've been providing care in the past 30 days, they're spending 20 hours a week on caregiving. So that's average, which means that there's people who are spending less time. There's some people who are, just coming to clean the house once a week and spending an hour, but there's also people who are spending a lot more time on their caregiving. And if it's not already obvious, that's the equivalent of a part-time job. So people are doing a lot of care. They're also helping with lots of different tasks. We talked about those personal care tasks, things like showering and eating. Those are often feel more intense and more personal for the caregivers. Around 40% of our caregivers in Wisconsin are doing that kind of work, whereas 76% are helping with household tasks. And of course, some people are doing both of those things. And there's a wide range in how long someone has been providing care. The bar graph down here, you can see that the largest bar there, the most people fall into that category where they've been providing care for more than 5 years. So there's a lot of people providing care for a very long time, and they're at risk of burnout. And so that's what we're talking about today. So back to our caregiver. Trying to do it all isn't working out so well, but that isn't stopping her from trying. She's vaguely aware that she's supposed to be doing self-care. People keep telling her to put on her oxygen mask and that you can't pour from an empty cup. She's a little fuzzy on what that entails. And how would she find time for that anyway? She dutifully adds an exercise regime, the occasional bubble bath, coffee with friends. She solicits help from family and friends. But her stress and the mental load of managing her care roles keeps rising. She describes herself as digging deep, pushing through the stress to do what needs to be done, telling herself that the situation is only temporary and there is really no other option anyway. She's living day by day, hour by hour, too focused on putting one foot in front of the other to think about what is and is not working to nourish her and fill her cup. So in this next section, I'll be talking a little bit about the way that people experience caregiving. So I talked about kind of what people, what the distribution is of people who are caregivers. Now I'm going to talk about what that feels like for people. And this quote is a quote from the TV show Ted Lasso. It says, "All people are different people." This is the quote that I like to highlight here because it's true. All caregivers are going to experience their care role differently. And we'll get into that more and again a little bit later. But my key point here is, and it's right here, no matter what you experience as a caregiver, you are in good company. Someone else is having a similar experience. So when I think and talk about caregiving, sometimes we talk a lot about, caregiving is really hard. On the flip side, sometimes we talk a whole lot about caregiver thriving and benefits from caregiving. And the reality is that both of those things happen in caregiving, and both of them happen at the same time. People see both benefits and challenges. So caregivers very commonly see positive aspects of caregiving. Almost universally, people can say, yes, here's something good that has come out of my care role. Caregivers also see difficulties and challenges. And those positive aspects and those difficulties, those can evolve over time. So whatever my experience is now, it might be different next month. It might be different tomorrow. It might be different in an hour. And these things coexist at the same time. So it's not just challenges. It's not just benefits. It's not that they counterbalance each other. They can both happen at the exact same time, and people can hold both of those things simultaneously. When we take a national survey of family caregivers, we see that by and large, the vast majority of caregivers feel happy with their life. And this is not separate from, they might still feel a lot of challenge, but they say, yeah, my life has meaning and purpose. Yeah, I feel good and confident about myself. Yeah, I like my living situation. So they feel good about their life. And in fact, when we dig deeper and we ask them about how caregiving has impacted them, more than half of caregivers say that they were given a sense of purpose from caregiving specifically. There are lots of other examples of the good things that people get from family caregiving. They can even gain health and well-being benefits. They have better quality of life just from doing caregiving. Now, this is particularly when stress and strain are low. Stress and strain can be risk factors for some of the negative outcomes we're going to talk about. But when stress and strain are low, caregiving can be really, truly beneficial for their health and well-being. They will sometimes say that they get a sense of relationship and connection. They make meaning out of their life. They feel gratitude, and they get a lot of transferable skills that then they can apply elsewhere. They learn problem solving. They learn how to manage insurance companies and figure out how to work through the healthcare system. All of these things are benefits that people potentially get out of family caregiving. And people can also identify a lot of difficulties. So this is an example of some of the difficulties that came up from cancer caregivers specifically, but I think these apply to a lot of other caregivers. One of the biggest unmet needs, one of the biggest challenges that these caregivers said they faced was helping the patient with their emotional distress, helping them with their fear, their anger, their anxiety. I don't know about everyone else's lived experiences of caregiving, but yeah, helping care recipients with their emotional distress is really, really hard. Second on that list is dealing with their own emotional distress. And often having to do that at the same time, right? You're helping someone else and you're helping yourself manage your own emotional distress simultaneously. Dealing with lifestyle changes, so figuring out the way that caregiving has shifted your daily routines, the way your life works, the relationships in your life, that's a challenge that caregivers have. Getting information about the health condition and then talking about the patient's concerns with them. These are all things, again, this is cancer caregivers, but I think this applies to a lot of other places. And one of the things that I think is notable about this graph, so the different colored bars on the bar chart, the green bar at the top of each section, that is what these caregivers said when they were 2 months into their caregiving journey. The red bar is after 2 years and the blue bar is after 5 years. And I think one of the things that's striking for me is that these things decrease, but they don't go away for these caregivers. 5 years later, they're still feeling these things. And so that speaks a little bit to the duration of this, to the lag time and how long these things persist if people aren't getting the support that they need for it. So again, a national survey of caregivers in the U.S. There's a lot of different experiences that people have with caregiving. When you look at what people say about physical strain, that's like, ooh, I was trying to get someone up off of a chair and man, that really hurt my back. Or I'm just walking around a lot. My feet are tired. When we ask people about physical strain, there's about 19% that say that they had kind of a lot of physical strain. And there's around 30% of people who said that they didn't have any physical strain at all from their caregiving. When we ask them about their emotional stress, there's around 38% of people who say that they had high emotional stress from their care role. And there's 38% of people who had pretty low emotional stress from their care role. When we ask about their feelings of loneliness, we've got about 24% of people who really say they feel alone, but we've got 31% of people who say they don't feel alone at all. So my point here is that, yeah, there are a lot of hard things that come with caregiving, but there's also situations where it's not hard. And so that is to really point out that there's a range of experiences and really circle back to that core point. No matter what you're experiencing as a caregiver, whether you are in that high stress category or that low stress category, you're in good company and you deserve help and support. Okay, back to our caregiver again. Our caregiver is continuing to flail. Whereas before she talked about digging deep to make it through, she now feels like she's dug so deep that she has hit bedrock. She describes herself as scraping the bottom. She feels like she's being pushed down by an invisible weight. She wakes up in the middle of the night, unable to go back to sleep. She's losing track of responsibilities, forgetting to pay bills, even leaving everyday objects in strange spots. The salt's in the fridge. Her bag gets left on top of her car. She says her brain feels like Swiss cheese. She hears someone else describe it as being at the bottom of the ocean, where you can't breathe and you don't know which way is up. That sounds about right to our caregiver. Okay, now we get into burnout. So we're going to talk here a little bit about the basics of burnout. And so my goal for this section is for you to come away with a sense of what burnout looks and feels like, so that we can identify it in ourselves and we can be ready to deal with it even before it gets to that full feeling of burnout. So the definition of burnout, and I'm borrowing this definition from this book. This is a wonderful book, by the way, of the title Burnout. So the formal definition of burnout is that it is a state of mental and physical exhaustion. I will point out that often we don't have to have this defined for us. We just kind of know what it is, but there is a key definition. So that includes emotional exhaustion. This is fatigue. Depersonalization. That's like, you just don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. And a decreased sense of accomplishments. This is like everything is futile. Nothing matters. Nothing I do is going to make any difference. That's the definition. I don't know about you, but that doesn't really tell me a whole lot about what it feels like. So next up here, I have some signs and symptoms of burnout. These signs and symptoms come in lots of different flavors. They affect your body, your brain, your emotions, and your behavior. So in your body, this feels like exhaustion. Our caregiver said that she felt like there was a weight on her. That's exhaustion. Tension. Physical symptoms, so that's a big category, but it can be like upset stomach, it can be migraines, it can be headaches, it can be really severe muscle knots that affect your body, joint pain. Physical symptoms that are coming specifically from the stress that you're experiencing. Frequent illness, because it can even impact our immune system and wear down our ability to fight off colds and flus. In our brain, it can feel like poor memory, concentration, attention. Our caregiver said that her brain feels like Swiss cheese and she's leaving the salt in the fridge. It can be hard to hold on to things. It can be hard to keep track of stuff in your mind. Difficulty thinking. People describe fogginess sometimes. In your emotions, it can feel like apathy. Like I just don't care. Helplessness, hopelessness, powerlessness. Nothing I do matters. Nothing matters at all. It can also be irritability and anger. It can be a really short fuse. Ineffective coping. This is like, I can't regulate my emotions. I can't figure out how to deal with the stressor. The stuff I'm trying in order to help myself is not working. And then in behavior, this is things like insomnia, not able to sleep or fall asleep and then wake up. Isolation. This is like, I don't want to hang out with my friends right now. I've been invited to a Thanksgiving dinner and I don't want to go. I just don't want to be around people. I want to be by myself. Detachment, feeling that sense of distance and feeling like you're breaking away from the things that you enjoy and the people that you enjoy. Just can't get stuff done. Listlessness. I've got stuff to do and I don't care. I think these signs and symptoms are important for a lot of reasons, which I'm actually going to circle back to in just a moment. So here's what it feels like. So this is a description of burnout from some real caregivers. in a research study where they asked caregivers, what does burnout feel like? And the way that they described it was suffering an unrelenting responsibility. So they felt overwhelmed by a daily grueling regimen. They felt like they had no other option. There's nothing else they could do. They just had to keep going. Our caregiver said that she had to push through the stress because there wasn't any other option. That's how they feel. Felt like life was coming to a halt, like everything was different and changed. And they felt like they were alone in bearing the burden and also the uncertainty that came with their care role. So that's what it felt like to them. I think it's helpful to talk a little bit about burnout versus not burnout. I don't think that people think they have burnout and are confused when it's not really burnout. I think it's the other way around. I think that people tend to think, no, this is just a bad day, when really it's burnout. And so I like to put this up just to give you that sense. So in the not burnout category, we have, it's a bad day. Caring about things is hard. I'm tired. I have to do some stuff that's kind of boring or hard. I don't know if I'm making a difference. I'm feeling pessimistic. That's a bad day. That's fine. It's not burnout. Burnout is when every day is a bad day, or there's more bad days than good days. It's caring feels like a waste of energy. I just don't care. Exhausted all the time. Consumed by tasks that feel mind-numbing or overwhelming. Feeling like nothing makes a difference and nobody appreciates me. And feeling like really cynical, like not just a little bit pessimistic, but like real cynical, real pessimistic. So here's the thing. We've got this categorized as not burnout and burnout, but that's not really how it works. Burnout is not something that we flip a switch for. It's something that can start really subtle and then it can progress really gradually. And so I don't know if people are familiar with the metaphor or the parable or whatever of the frog and the boiling pot. But the idea goes like this. We've got this frog. And in the fable, if a frog is in warm water that slowly starts getting warmer and warmer, the frog just thinks he's having a fabulous time. He's got his very own hot tub, happy as can be. But ultimately, the water ends up getting too hot for the frog. And by the time he notices, it's too late. And this can feel a lot like what burnout is for us. We may not realize that our water's getting hotter until all of a sudden it's real hot and we are in full-on burnout mode. We are in that second column, not in between. And so thinking about this ahead of time can be helpful in having us prepared for how to deal with it and how to move forward. Okay, let's give you a little bit of relief here. Back to our caregiver. Our caregiver recognizes, finally, that she is that frog in the hot water. Something has to give. All that talk about putting on her own oxygen mask, and she's been gasping for breath for a while now and doesn't even know what an oxygen mask might look like for her. So she starts small. She gets curious. She makes a point to find small moments of joy and savor them. Ducks floating on a pond, hearing a child laugh. She tries to start building connections with others. When coffee with a friend feels like too much, she focuses on the way books and podcasts speak to her and make her feel like she's not alone. How can she get help and create a little more space for herself? She maps out her support network and starts asking for what she needs. She learns about self-compassion and starts practicing it relentlessly. She connects with resources, respite care, support groups that help her feel connected and nourished. She starts experimenting with creative writing and art, which help her reconnect with her own emotional landscape and ultimately help her make meaning of her care journey. Okay, recovery, resilience. This is the most important part of the talk. And I wanted to go through the hard part with you all because it's so frequent that we don't realize when we're in burnout. I got to tell you, when I was putting these slides together, I was making that list of symptoms and thinking back on one of my own care experiences, and I was like, oh, I was in burnout and I didn't even realize it. I didn't realize it until right this moment. And I'm supposed to be an expert in these things. So looking at that and going, oh gosh, I've been burned out, or oh gosh, I know someone else who's burned out. That's very common. And that's why I think it's important to talk about those things specifically and the hard stuff. But now we can get to the stuff that feels life affirming. So I'd like to start with a metaphor here. Sometimes we hear a lot about caregiver thriving. How do we thrive as a caregiver, a thrivership? I tend to think of that in my metaphor as like the bloom of a flower. The bloom of a flower, that's a wonderful thing to strive towards. That's beautiful. Makes us very happy. Wouldn't we all like to be a blooming flower? And the flower is not the only part of a plant. And it's not always in bloom anyway. We would never expect a flower to be blooming all the time. So that bloom is a wonderful thing to have as our goal, and it's a wonderful thing to experience when the seasons come around for that. But that doesn't mean that the leaves and the stems aren't also important. And it also doesn't mean that the ground, the earth, and making sure that the soil is nourished and that the seeds are planted, it doesn't mean that that's not important either. These things are all important. So when I think about resilience and thriving, I don't actually think about the flower anymore. I think the flower is great. I think the flower will arrive when it's ready for the flower to bloom. What I think about is, how are we making sure that the soil is fertile? How are we planting the seeds? And how are we nourishing the seeds so that when the time comes, they can bloom? And that's a metaphor for our self-care, our community care, and making sure that we're accessing the resources that can help us in order to have that fertile soil and be able to have resilience bloom. So I think about this in a few different types of support. There's the support that we do for ourselves. This is self-care. I specifically define that as like getting the health care that you need, doing the things that your body needs in order to function. Self-soothing, that's things like bubble baths, things that feel really good, and like, or even distractions that like take us out of distress in the moment, make us feel better. They soothe our emotions, but they don't necessarily last. And then emotional hygiene strategies. That's the stuff that like really helps us to manage our emotions over the long term. And I added meaning making on here because as I was putting all of these slides together, I kept noticing that I didn't have meaning making emphasized. And to my mind, the reason we do all of these things that I'm going to talk about next is because it helps us make meaning of our experience. And that's the thing that lets our flower bloom and lets our seeds grow. There's also how others support you. So this is social support from family and friends. It's also social support from other people who have been through it that are not even necessarily, you might not even know their name, but you know that they have been through a similar experience and it helps you feel less alone. And then there's community care. That's the way that we all come together to help and support each other, sometimes in really non-specific ways. It's not necessarily conversations, but it's making sure that everyone has what they need. We'll talk about these things in a little bit. And then there is, within that community care piece and related to it, is how the community supports you. So this is the formal support services that are available. There is a lot that I could go into within each of these categories. If we had like a 6-day workshop, I would do that, but we don't. We have an hour. So I'm actually going to talk a very tiny amount about the top ones, and I'm going to focus on that community care and the formal support services piece, because that is the stuff that helps create the space for you to be able to do those other things that are nourishing you as an individual, to explore those things, to find those things, to work through those things and work with those things. So first things first is burnout first aid. If someone's in burnout right in this very moment, sometimes people are fully in crisis. If they're in crisis, they should talk to their healthcare provider. And if they're really in like immediate crisis, they should call 988, which is the mental health hotline, because that's going to help get them the resources that they need to no longer be in crisis. So that's an important first step. If someone is really, really on the brink, if someone's on the far edge of burnout and really needs help immediately. Dialing back a little bit, someone who's not quite that far, the first aid for burnout first is create that space for nourishment. This is asking, what do I need in this moment? And this isn't like, I need to go swim with dolphins in Hawaii. This is like, I need to take 3 deep breaths, or I need to not be in this conversation anymore. I need to end this conversation and I need to go be alone. Or I need to write a thank you note to someone who did something nice for me. What do I need in this moment that's going to make me feel nourished? And what can I do to get there, even if it's really small? Noticing and savoring these micro moments of connection, awe, and joy. This is something that we can do anytime, any place. There is an activity that I like to do with my children, which is called a 5-4-3-2-1. It's a grounding activity, and it uses your senses to bring you back into the moment. So it's 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and then usually it's 1 thing you can taste. Usually I don't want them licking things, and usually there's nothing to taste in that very moment. So then we'll probably do something like 1 thing you're grateful for, or 1 thing you're looking forward to, or 1 calming thought that you can hold. And that's a really nice way of having that moment to have a micro moment and notice, wow, look at these beautiful quilts on the walls. Wow, look at that person smiling. Listen to their laughter. It helps us reconnect with ourselves and with our world. And again, that is the cure to burnout. Not instantly. It doesn't do it instantly. But reconnecting is the thing that will ultimately get you there. And then practicing self-compassion. I think self-compassion here is really important. So I'm going to dig into this one just a tiny bit because it can be so incredibly helpful. So self-compassion has 3 parts. The first one is recognizing that you're having a big feeling, whatever it happens to be, and having kindness to yourself for that. I guess I'm going backwards here. So the first one, I'm going backwards here. The first one is recognizing. The second one is acknowledging that everyone has a hard time sometimes. You're not alone in that. Everybody feels mad sometimes. Everyone feels frustrated sometimes. Everyone feels sad sometimes. And then really being kind to ourselves, the way that we would be kind to a really close friend who was having a hard time. I, at one point, took a self-compassion class with my little one, my 6-year-old, and they taught it to us like this, because there's hand motions that go with it, which I really appreciate because it helps me remember to do it. Wow, this is hard. Often I'll name whatever it is. I'm feeling really frustrated because I just burned the spaghetti. We all feel that way sometimes. I'm not the first person to burn spaghetti. I'm not the last person to burn spaghetti. We all burn spaghetti sometimes. It happens. I can give myself grace for that. I can start again. I can be kind to myself for that, the way I would be kind to someone else who burnt spaghetti. And so this I find is really helpful in remembering. Again, it was designed for children, but I appreciate it because it triggers me to think about, oh gosh, this is hard. Everyone has a hard time. Be nice to yourself. Be nice to yourself and give yourself grace. So self-compassion, just doing these 3 things and doing it consistently can really help to bring yourself back from the edge and start to reconnect with yourself again. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one either, but I have a core point that I like to make is that caregiving happens in context. It's not just caregiving that's impacting you when you're a caregiver. It's all of the other things in your life that are surrounding or part of your life and are impacted by that caregiving context. So the way that I talk about this is that it's not the caregiving itself. It is the caregiving, but it's really the way that the caregiving changes your roles. So like what you do, maybe suddenly you're taking on household roles. You're doing lawn mowing when you didn't before, that kind of thing. Your relationships, your routines. I wake up in the morning, I have a cup of coffee, I go to work. Maybe that's not how my day goes anymore. And your assumptions, what you think is true about the world, what you know to be true about the world, that maybe shifts. If we can think about the way that caregiving impacts those things, it can help us realize the way that our context and caregiving are intersecting, and it can help us figure out, oh gosh, that's why this is so hard. All of a sudden, my roles are different, my relationships are different, my routines are different, and I have to make totally different assumptions about the way the world works because caregiving has shifted so much of my life. And all of this starts with awareness. So you may or may not be familiar with a wellness wheel. A wellness wheel basically takes our whole person wellness and breaks it into several categories. There's different versions. You can kind of have whatever categories make sense for you. The one that I chose has physical, intellectual, spiritual, occupational, social, and emotional categories. And Occupational is sometimes a little confusing. So this is jobs, but it's also like hobbies. It's play. I would categorize things like art and music and that kind of thing in that occupational category. And I bring this up because, as I said before, everybody is different and they have different things that are going to nourish them. And what's going to nourish them, we can think about in these different categories, and people can kind of decide which of the things they are wanting to connect with. You can make your own wellness wheel just by drawing. So let's do 6 concentric circles. Let's divide it into 6 different wedges. We'll write our categories into the edges here. And then you can take a moment and think about, how satisfied are you in each of these categories? A 1 is, man, I'm struggling and I'm really unfulfilled. A 5 is totally satisfied, super happy with the way this is going. And then I can wiggle it, and then I can actually draw it in, right? So I can say like, ooh, my physical health is not great. I am not meeting my physical needs very well. I'm a 1. I am unsatisfied with my physical well-being. But with my intellectual well-being, I'm doing a lot of reading. I'm doing a lot of thinking. I'm engaging in conversations with people. I feel pretty good about my intellectual well-being. And you can go all the way around and fill that in. And that can help you as an individual think about where you want to focus your energy, because we don't have infinite time and energy. And then we can do well-being practices within those categories. So this is just a few examples of what well-being practices might look like. I actually trust everyone in the audience to know what's going to work well for them, or to be able to crowdsource good ideas if they're kind of not sure. But it might be things like, I know that I feel best when I am going for walks regularly. So that's the well-being practice that I need to help boost my physical energy. I know that when I am practicing mindfulness, or when I have a gratitude practice where I'm writing down 3 things I'm grateful for every day, that my emotions feel best and I feel connected with myself. I know that the stuff that helps me make sense of all of this wild caregiving that I've been doing and the wild way that I feel about it is to journal, or to do an art project, or to do woodworking, or to listen to music. So these are all in that caring for yourself category and the way that you support yourself. And you all already know what works for you, and you know what you can try. You can find your curiosity, what you can try that is maybe going to help advance that. When we talk to those same caregivers from before about what helps them with their burnout, their feelings of burnout, this is what it looks like. For them, it was establishing a new normal, drawing inspiration and support from family, relying on faith and hope for motivation, and finding meaning in other activities. And so this is that other activity space. That's where we're thinking about, how can we find what nourishes ourselves and work on that piece. Another important part of this is to take respite when you can. So respite is a fancy word that just means take a short break. It's a short break where someone else takes over your caregiving responsibilities. It can be for a couple hours. It can be for a couple days. There's a wide range of ways that people use respite in their life. And sometimes it's a family member or friend taking over those duties. Sometimes it's a formal service provider, an adult daycare, a respite provider who comes into the home that helps take that over. And there's also opportunities sometimes to do shared activities where you both feel welcome. So the Senior Center here is one example of that, where this is a welcoming space where caregivers can come, care recipients can come, and they may be doing activities together, they may be doing activities separate, but they all feel welcomed, and they all feel like it's a space where they can find their own spaciousness and figure out what's nourishing them. So respite can be associated with caregiver burden. One of the things that we see, though, is that people don't start taking respite until they already feel burnt out. And then it's much harder to come back from that. So if we think about, how can I get respite? How can I take the breaks that I need early on? How can I ask for what I need and know what I need early on? That can help a lot. And I think one of the most important things about respite is not the rest part itself, as I said earlier, but it makes space for these other activities that are nourishing, that are filling your cup, that are making you feel connected with yourself and others. Community resources are super important here. And so this is where I wanted to lean in a little bit further. Again, you all know what's going to work for you in your own self-care, but you might not know about these community resources. And there's resources across all of these categories. The ones that you see in bold, these are resources that are available right here in the senior center here, and are pieces that you can connect with in order to help meet your needs in these areas and help make that space to find your own nourishing activities. So things like community rides, like the loan closet for medical equipment, aging with wisdom. That's what you're doing right now, where you're learning, you're activating that intellectual area of your well-being. The senior center meals and the different programs that they offer. That bingo program sounds amazing, and I am super excited about it. That's social connection right there. But there's also programs through Extension. You heard earlier that I work with the Division of Extension. They've got a lot of really great programs that can be helpful. Things like powerful tools for caregivers through the Aging and Disability Resource Centers. Things through the university like the Healthy Minds app. I know that mindfulness sometimes can feel unapproachable because it feels a little woo, or it feels a little like, oh, you want me to sit quietly. I really like this Healthy Minds app. I've used it myself because it makes it approachable. And it makes it so that you can really understand the why and the how and the what of counting your breaths or going for a walking meditation and just noticing the world around you. So there's lots of different opportunities. There's lots of different resources that we can draw on in our community in order to fill these buckets, in order to meet these different areas of need around the wellness wheel. And because, of course, you're not going to memorize all of this, and there's not enough details on here anyway, the main thing that I want to do with this part is point you to some gateway resources, in addition to the Senior Center here, that are going to help you find those things, because you don't know what you don't know. The first one here is wisconsincaregiver.org. This is a website put together by the Wisconsin Family and Caregiver Support Alliance, which is a group of professionals as well as family caregivers across the state whose has the main goal of connecting caregivers with resources and making it easier for caregivers to get the support they need. So that is a gateway to the supports and resources all across the state. The second one is the Aging and Disability Resource Center. This isn't just for people who are aging and people with disabilities. This is also for their caregivers. And they hold a lot of knowledge and a lot of resources and can answer questions and connect families with the support services that they're going to need. The Respite Care Association of Wisconsin, they have all kinds of resources around respite care. Including a new one that has a title I don't remember. It used to be called Meals as Respite, where people can apply for a small amount of money to get meals at home, not through Meals on Wheels, but separately from that, because that hour or 2 hours that it takes to grocery shop and make a meal is time that you can then spend on your own nourishment, on what you need. Trualta is a web platform that offers 24/7 support for caregivers. It is free to Wisconsin caregivers, so any caregiver across Wisconsin can sign up, and it's free. And it has lots of trainings, it has support groups, and it also just has a lot of information. And again, that's 24/7 support that's available there. And then Archangels is the last one. I'm actually going to show you a picture of what Archangels does. This is where if you're like, am I burnt out? I don't know. I think I'm probably fine. Or like, I'm really, really burnt out and I need someone to tell me that. They have an intensity score. So a questionnaire that you go through takes about 2 minutes, and it gives you an intensity score. It tells you if you are in the white, the yellow, or the red, and then also connects you with resources. So it says, here's the things that were intense for you based on that questionnaire. Here's resources that can help you with that. And sometimes it's information, and sometimes it's directing you to other resources that can help. And sometimes it's just letting you know about information that can be helpful. So that's Archangels. I also wanted to put a few other resources for people. So beyond those gateway resources, those gateway are like, I don't know what I don't know and I need help, go to those gateway resources. But there's also, if you're just interested in burnout, and self-care and caregiving, these are several books that are a good starting place for learning more about that. Burnout by Emily and Amelia Nagoski, Real Self-Care by Pooja Lakshman, Stand By Me by Allison Applebaum, and Self-Compassion by Kristin Neff. There's also programs. I already mentioned Powerful Tools for Caregivers. There's also a positive emotions program called We Cope that is offered through Extension. Sometimes they are in person and sometimes they're virtual, and they go for across the entire state. If there's a veteran that you're caring for, the VA has really great caregiver support. And so this is the caregiver support line to learn more about that. And then, of course, there's local programs. There's programs here. There's programs through the community rec. There's programs through the library that finding that information or just calling the library and asking what they've got can help connect you either with information about caregiving, but also help you connect with things that are going to make you feel nourished, whatever that is for you, whether it's a music program or an art program or a support group, they will have access to that. So I mentioned that our caregiver maps out her community. This is something that I think people tend to forget. First of all, caregivers don't have to do it all. It's not a one-person job. It shouldn't be a one-person job. Community care is everyone coming together to support each other. But I hear a lot that caregivers are like, well, there's no one to support me. There's no one around me. And I challenge caregivers to prove to me that that's not true. This is an example of a map. There's a whole protocol called the Atlas of Caregiving. You don't have to follow that protocol. You can just think about who's around you and who's there to support you and draw out who am I caring for and who can care for me, whether that's in my personal life, whether that is my neighbors, whether that is in work or volunteer life. Who is around me, whether it's my faith community, who is around me that cares about me, that is going to show up when I need them, and how can I ask for what I need and invite them to help me with that? Because it feels really good to be asked for help. It feels really good to help someone else. When you know that someone else is struggling, you want to help them, and to have someone say, hey, can you drop off a meal every Tuesday for the next month? That would really, really help me. Can you help drive someone to a health appointment? That would really help me. It feels good to help. People want to help. And so once we start mapping out what our care system looks like, I think most people are surprised by how deep it is and how wide it is. So what nourishes us? What helps us make meaning? What helps us feel like a whole person? This differs from person to person. And these are just some different ways that people can approach what nourishes them. And there's a million others that are not up on the screen. So when we are asking for what help we need, when we are getting respite, when we are using our community resources, it gives us space to figure out what's nourishing us, to build that connection with ourselves and with others that is going to help get us through, that's going to prevent burnout and help us come back from the edge when we get too far. And so my call to action for you is this. I want you to think really carefully about what nourishes you. What do you need in this moment? And then what can you do today, one small thing, to bring that closer? Maybe it's finding out about respite care. Maybe it's finding out more about those community services. Think about it. Better yet, write it down. Better yet, write it down and tell a friend, because that's going to help you actually do it and move forward with it so that you can get the support that you need and find your bloom. As for our caregiver, as she does more to nourish herself, she starts to heal and recover. As her care role comes to a close, she feels more focused, more empathetic than before. She has come out stronger, and this is resilience. So I'd want to close with this poem. This is a poem that has spoken to me before in my own care roles. It is by Sharon Marsh, and it is read like this. Monarch butterflies will not attempt to fly in the rain because the raindrops will damage their delicate wings. They will rest and wait it out. It's self-preservation. It's okay to rest during the storms in your life. Take all the time you need. You will fly again once the storm passes. And that's where I'll end. Thank you, everyone.